The oxygen masks hung like pale fruit from the ceiling panels, and the master caution panel glowed angry red. Somewhere outside the thin aluminum skin, a calm male voice cut through the static. "Viper, this is Raptor 1-1. We have visual. Welcome back. Before you watch the full story, comment below. Which country are you watching from? And don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow's story might be even bigger." Sarah Hale sat in 14C, with her black backpack tucked under the seat in front of her, and a half-finished crossword balanced on the tray table. The crossword was from a free airport newspaper she had picked up while waiting at the gate in Portland. She wore a soft gray cardigan over a plain white shirt, hair pulled back in a low ponytail that made her look like every other tired parent flying home after a long school conference. A roll of peppermint candies sat in the cup holder, beside a thermos of lukewarm tea. She always carried them, old habit from years of motion and thin air that she had never quite shaken. The flight attendant, a cheerful woman named Denise with bright lipstick and a voice that stayed permanently upbeat, leaned over with the exaggerated smile adults use on children. "Need another soda, sweetie? Or maybe I can help you with that little puzzle. Those crosswords can be tricky." Sarah smiled back the way she always did now. Small, grateful, invisible. "I'm good, thank you. Almost finished." Outside the window, the Cascade Range was turning the color of old bruises as evening settled over the mountains. Inside, the cabin smelled of recycled air, the burnt coffee tang that never quite left these older 737 seconds, and the faint plastic sweetness of the snack bags being passed down the aisle. 2 rows ahead, a businessman in a loud patterned tie kept sighing at his laptop and muttering about connection times. Across the aisle, a little girl no older than 7 clutched a stuffed orca whale and pressed her face to the window. Sarah's backpack felt heavier than it should. Inside it, under the lesson plans for next week's history unit, and the thermos, was a folded laminated card that still smelled faintly of jet fuel if you held it close enough. 12 years earlier, the same card had been clipped to her kneeboard, while she rolled an F-22 Raptor through a vertical scissors fight at 30,000 feet over the Nevada desert. The memory came the way they always did. Fast, bright, unwanted. Her wingman's voice crackling in the helmet. "Viper, brake left, bandits on your 6, now." The G-suit squeezing her legs until her vision tunneled. The radar tone changing from search to lock. That rising electronic scream that meant someone was about to die if you didn't move first. And later, on the sun-baked ramp after the debrief, her old wing commander resting a heavy hand on her shoulder and saying the line that still lived under her ribs like a second heartbeat. "The sky doesn't forget a Viper." She had walked away after the accident that took her husband, also a Raptor pilot, during a night training sortie that went wrong in ways no checklist could fix. Turned in the flight suit, the helmet, the call sign. Took a teaching certificate, buried everything under parent-teacher conferences, cafeteria duty, and the quiet rhythm of 8th grade history lessons. No one on this plane knew. Not the captain up front with the salt and pepper hair and the calm hands she had watched during boarding. Not the young first officer who still looked like he was waiting for his voice to finish changing. Not Denise with the baby talk voice and the tray of pretzels. The airplane gave a tiny shudder, nothing the average passenger would notice. Sarah felt it through the soles of her shoes, a vibration that didn't match the usual harmonic of the CFM engines. She glanced forward. The cockpit door was closed, but the galley curtain had drifted open for a second. The captain's left hand, visible for just a moment, rubbed at his upper arm the way a man rubs a bruise that won't quit. He rolled his shoulder once, then twice, before the curtain swung shut again. She told herself it was nothing. She went back to the crossword. 17 across, 4-letter word for sudden danger. The little girl across the aisle asked her mother if the mountains were made of chocolate. The businessman typed harder. Sarah unwrapped another peppermint, the sharp coolness flooding her mouth, and let the ordinary evening settle around her like a blanket she had spent 12 years weaving. The vibration came again, softer this time, almost polite. She kept her eyes on the puzzle. The captain's hand had disappeared. And somewhere deep in the quiet part of her mind, the old voice whispered the line one more time. Calm, certain, waiting. The sky doesn't forget a viper. The seatbelt sign chimed a second time, brighter and more insistent, as if the airplane itself wanted everyone to stay put. Denise's voice came over the speakers, still trying for cheerful. "Just a little chop, folks. Captain says keep those belts fastened for a few more minutes." Sarah felt the next vibration through the floor, sharper this time, like a low growl under the engines. She looked up from the crossword. Through the half-open galley curtain, she caught a clear glimpse of the captain. His face had gone the color of old paper. He was rubbing his left arm again, harder, and his other hand hovered over the yoke without quite settling. The young first officer leaned in, saying something too low to hear. The captain waved him off with a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. That was the small wrong detail. The hesitation, the pale face, the way his shoulders stayed locked, even while he tried to look calm for the cameras that weren't there. 7 minutes later, the airplane yawed. Not a big swing, just enough that the drink cart in the aisle rattled, and a few passengers grabbed their armrests. A soft thump came from the cockpit, the sound of a body meeting something solid. The first officer's voice cracked over the cabin speakers, too high, too fast. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a medical situation with the captain. Please remain seated. Flight attendants, prepare for possible diversion." The crack widened. Autopilot disconnect warnings chirped, thin and insistent, leaking through the closed cockpit door like a bird trapped in a wall. The airplane rolled into a shallow right bank, and the nose dipped just enough for the Cascade peaks outside the windows to tilt. Denise was already moving up the aisle, face pale under the makeup, calling for a doctor. The businessman in the loud tie stood up like he might volunteer just to look useful. The little girl with the stuffed orca started to cry. Her mother pulled her close and whispered that everything was fine even while her own hands shook. Sarah's peppermint sat unwrapped on her tongue, sharp and cool. Her heart did not stay cool. She could feel the old checklist unspooling behind her eyes. Oxygen first, then communication, then navigation, then control. 214 souls. A young foe who sounded like he was drowning in his own headset, and 12 years of carefully built ordinary life sitting in seat 14C like a mask she could still choose to keep wearing. The FO's voice came again, raw this time. "Is there a doctor on board? Or anyone with flight experience? Please, stay with me here, because what happens next is the part nobody saw coming. Would you have broken cover to save strangers, even if it cost you everything you had rebuilt?" Sarah's hand stayed folded on the crossword for 3 full breaths. The backpack pressed against her shins, heavier than lesson plans and a thermos had any right to be. She could still sit. She could let someone else try. She could protect the quiet life where no one called her Viper, and the only altitude she managed was the height of a classroom whiteboard. She unbuckled. The seatbelt clicked loud in the sudden hush that always follows bad news on an airplane. Denise turned, eyes wide. The businessman started to say something about protocol. Sarah stepped into the aisle, the black backpack swinging once against her leg as she moved forward. Every face that tracked her looked either hopeful or suspicious. She kept her expression blank, the same polite mask she used for parent conferences, even while her pulse hammered in her throat and her fingers remembered the exact shape of a control stick. At the cockpit door, the FO nearly slammed it in her face. "Ma'am, passengers stay out. This is a sterile environment. I'm type-rated on the 737 and I have military tactical experience," she said, voice level, the old command cadence slipping out before she could stop it. "Let me help, or we're all going to learn what a graveyard spiral feels like at night over mountains." He stared. Behind him, the captain was slumped sideways in the left seat, oxygen mask half on, skin the color of wet paper, left hand still curled against his chest. The airplane was in a shallow right bank, altitude bleeding slowly through the altimeter. ATC was already on the radio asking for intentions. The controller's voice calm but clipped. "You're a school teacher," the FO said, almost accusing. "I saw you with the crossword and the candies, and you're 3 degrees nose low and 30 knots slow. Correct it, Or, give me the seat. He corrected. Barely. The bank lessened. Sarah slid into the jump seat, the backpack settling on the floor between them like a quiet witness. She pulled the spare headset on, and the world narrowed to glass, switches, and the low moan of the slipstream outside. The FO's hands were white on the yoke. His voice shook when he spoke to Center. Seattle Center, Flight 447, we have a pilot incapacitation. Sarah watched the instruments. She watched the FO. She watched the way the hydraulic pressure needles sat just a hair lower than they should. The backpack sat open enough at the top that the corner of the old laminated checklist card showed, the one that still smelled faintly of jet fuel. She had carried it for 12 years and never once expected to need it again. Outside the window, the last light was leaving the Cascades. Inside the cockpit, the captain's breathing was shallow under the mask. The FO glanced at her, still not believing, still hoping she was just another passenger who watched too many documentaries. Sarah met his eyes and felt the choice settle into her bones like cold metal. She could still back out. She could still stay hidden. Or she could key the mic and let the sky remember her name. The FO's knuckles stayed white on the yoke as the airplane settled into a ragged wings-level attitude. "I don't care what you say you used to fly," he said, voice cracking through the headset. "You're a passenger. I can't just hand over control to some random person with a backpack and a crossword. Center is going to ask for my certificate number, not yours." Sarah kept her hands visible and empty on her knees. The jump seat harness dug into her shoulders. Behind them, the cockpit door was still half open. The businessman in the loud tie had pushed past Denise and now filled the threshold, face red, phone already out like he planned to film whatever came next. "This is insane," he barked. "She's a school teacher. I watched her board with peppermints and a thermos. Get her out of here before she kills us all." ATC cut through the argument, calm but sharp. Flight 447, Seattle Center. Confirm pilot flying is the first officer. Say nature of assistance from any passenger and provide certificate number if they are acting as crew. The FO glanced at her, still not convinced. "See? They want proof. You don't have any." Sarah felt the old calm settle over her the way a G-suit used to, tight and familiar. She reached down, unzipped the black backpack at her feet, and pulled out the laminated checklist card that had lived under lesson plans for 12 years. The edges were worn soft. The jet fuel smell rose faint and sharp in the recycled air. She held it up so both men could see the faded squadron stamp and the handwritten notes in the margins, her own handwriting from another life. "I'm not asking for the seat yet," she said. "I'm giving you the next 3 calls because you're about to miss them. Altitude is still bleeding. You're at 9,400 and dropping through 200 feet per minute. Correct? To 9,500 and hold. Heading 310 will put us on the high downwind for Mac Chord instead of fighting the mountain wave over the Cascades. And the hydraulic quantity on the A system is already at 68%. Look at the needle, not the light. That's why the ailerons feel heavy." The FO's eyes flicked to the gauges. The bank had crept back in. He rolled the wings level and pulled the nose up exactly as she had said. The vertical speed settled. The heading bug moved. The businessman started to protest again, but Denise put a hand on his arm and pulled him back a step. ATC came back, colder now. 447. We need positive identification of any additional qualified pilot. Civilian passengers are not authorized to give control inputs. Sarah keyed the spare mic before the FO could stumble. "Seattle Center, Flight 447 jump seat. This is a former military instructor pilot with 737 type rating and current medical. I am assisting with checklists and communications only. First officer remains pilot flying. We request immediate vectors to Mac Chord AFB, runway 25, and declare emergency for pilot incapacitation plus degrading hydraulic quantity. Sols 214, fuel 3 hours 10 minutes. How copy?" Silence stretched for 2 heartbeats. Then the controller's voice returned, still skeptical but professional. "Copy emergency. A dent. Say again your last military qualification. F-22 instructor, call sign Viper, 12 years ago. I can give you the old tail number if you want to wake somebody up at Langley, but right now I'd rather not die while we wait for the paperwork. The FO stared at her. The businessman had gone quiet. Through the side window the last purple light was leaving the peaks. Sarah watched the FO's hands ease a fraction on the yoke as the airplane responded cleanly to the corrections she had called. He looked at the checklist card still in her fingers, then at the hydraulic needle that was indeed sitting lower than it should. "How did you know the quantity without the light?" he asked, almost whispering. "Because the light comes on at 60. We're already past that, and the feel in the controls told me the rest. You've got maybe 12 minutes of clean aileron before it gets ugly. Configure early, or we land with whatever the airplane gives us." The prophetic line moved through her mind like a radio call from a long way off. The sky doesn't forget a Viper. She slipped the checklist card into the FO's empty kneeboard slot, where he could see the steps without looking away from the windscreen. The black backpack sat open at her feet, no longer just a teacher's bag full of papers and tea. It was the last piece of the old life she had carried without meaning to, and now it was open for everyone to see. Outside, the first distant runway lights of the military field began to glow against the dark. Inside the cockpit, the captain's breathing stayed shallow under the mask. The FO swallowed hard, then nodded once. Small, reluctant, but real. "Okay," he said. "Talk me through the next page. And don't make me regret this." Sarah felt her own hands start to steady. The airplane was still flying. The sky was still waiting, and somewhere out there in the dark, two very fast shadows were already turning toward them. The FO's nod was small, but it was enough. Sarah slid the checklist card fully into his kneeboard, then reached across and selected the weather radar to a tighter scale. The returns that had looked like scattered green resolved into a hard red line sitting right across their original path. "We're not going anywhere near that," she said, voice low and even. "McCord is still the play. Longer runway, arresting gear if we need it, and the crash crews already know how to handle a heavy jet with system problems. Tell center we want the visual approach to 25, left traffic if the wind allows." He made the call. His voice still shook, but the words came out in the right order. Center handed them off to McCord approach. The new controller's tone was all business. "Flight 447, radar contact. Descend and maintain 5,000. Expect visual 25. Winds 240 at 12, gusting 18. Crash grid is hot. Say fuel and souls again." Sarah answered for him. 3 hours even. 214 souls. We have a pilot incapacitated, a hydraulic quantity at 61% and dropping, flight controls still responsive but heavy. Request early configuration and a long final. Copy all. You're number 1. Cleared visual approach, runway 25. Report field in sight. She looked at the FO. "You still have the airplane. I'm on radios and checklists. Scan, attitude, airspeed, altitude, engines, then the hydraulic quantity every 10 seconds. If the aileron feel gets worse, I'll take the controls. Clear?" "Clear." They began the descent. Sarah talked him through every step the way she used to talk brand-new Raptor students through their first night landings. "Speed brake armed. Auto brakes to max. When I call for gear, you'll put it down and leave it. Flaps will be 15 only. Anything more, and the hydraulic demand might finish us. Vref for flaps. 15 with this weight is 142. We'll add 20 for the gusts and the system issue. So target 162 over the fence. You fly the numbers. I'll call the deviations." The FO swallowed hard and nodded. Outside the side windows, the military field's runway lights bloomed in the dark like a string of white beads. The captain's breathing stayed shallow under the oxygen mask. Sarah reached over once, adjusted the mask seal, and felt how cold his skin was. Then the hydraulic quantity light went solid amber, and the ailerons got heavier in the FO's hands. "Quantity 48, she said, calm, as if she were reading a grocery list. "We're losing it faster. Configure now. Gear down." He moved the lever. The gear lights went green one by one, left, nose, right. The airplane yawed a fraction as the doors opened. "Flaps 15. He selected it. The leading-edge devices rolled out with a low mechanical groan. Airspeed bled toward the target. That was when the mountain wave hit them sideways. The left wing dropped hard. The FO overcorrected. The nose pitched up, and the stall warning stick shaker rumbled through both control columns for half a second before Sarah's hand closed over his on the yoke. Firm, not fighting him, just steadying. "I've got it with you," she said quietly. "Wings level, nose down 2 degrees. Airspeed. That's it. Breathe." He breathed. The shaker stopped. The wing came back. In that half-second of shared control she felt the pure terror running through his arms and something in her own chest loosened. "You're doing fine," she told him, softer than the radios. "Better than fine. Just keep the shiny side up and we'll walk away from this. Imperfect and alive. That's the only kind that counts." A child's voice leaked through the open cockpit door from the cabin. Thin, scared, asking if the plane was going to be okay. Denise's answer was too bright. Sarah keyed the cabin paw for one short sentence. "This is the flight deck. We're landing shortly. Stay seated, stay calm. We've got good people on the ground waiting for us." She released the PA and went straight back to the approach. "Field in sight," she told the controller. "Request landing clearance. 447. Cleared to land runway 25. Wind now 250 at 15, gusting 22. You're a little high." "Correcting." Sarah glanced at the vertical speed. "Pull the power back another percent. Aim for the 1,000-foot markers, not the threshold. If the right main doesn't lock, we'll hold the wing with rudder and ride whatever we get." The F-22s arrived without warning. 2 dark shapes sliding into position, one off each wingtip, their navigation lights deliberately bright so the civilian cockpit could see them. The lead's voice came over the frequency dry and familiar as old leather. "Civilian 447, Raptor 1, flight of 2. We have visual. You're trailing a light hydraulic mist from the right wing route. Configure is good. Suggest you accept the long landing and keep the nose wheel light until you're slow." "How copy?" The FO's eyes went wide. Sarah felt the prophetic line rise in her throat the way it used to before every engagement. She keyed the mic and let 12 years fall away in 4 words. "Raptor 1-1, this is Viper. The sky doesn't forget." A short silence. Then the lead's voice came back warmer, sharper, almost smiling. "Viper, Raptor 1-1, solid copy. Welcome back. We've got the high cover. Runway is yours. Crash trucks rolling. Nice and easy now." "Copy, Raptor. Glad you're here." She looked at the FO. "Your airplane until the flare. I'll take it if the wing drops again. Ready?" "No," he said, honest. "Me neither. Do it anyway." The runway lights rushed up. Wind shear grabbed the left wing a second time. Sarah called the correction the old-school way. Quiet, precise, no wasted syllables. The main gear slammed onto the concrete hard enough that the entire airframe shuddered, and the oxygen masks finished deploying throughout the cabin with a soft plastic rain. A tire blew on the right main with a sound like a shotgun in a metal room. The airplane lurched right, the wingtip dropping toward the runway lights. Sarah's hand was already on the yoke with his. "Rudder, more, hold it. Drag chute. Now." The chute blossomed white in the landing lights behind them. The nose came down, the blown tire thumped and scraped. They stayed on the center line by the width of a prayer and a lot of muscle memory. Reverse thrust came up. The auto brakes grabbed. The airplane slowed, fought, then settled into a long, ugly roll that finally stopped 1,000 feet from the far end with the right wing still low, and the smell of hot brakes and hydraulic fluid filling the cockpit. Silence. Only the FO's ragged breathing and the captain's shallow one under the mask. Sarah's hands began to shake only after the parking brake was set. Outside, the first crash truck's lights painted the windscreen red and blue. The black backpack sat open on the floor between the seats, checklist card still in the kneeboard, thermos somehow still upright. She looked at the FO. He looked back at her like the sky had cracked open and something impossible had stepped through. "You can let go of the yoke now," she said, voice rough. "We made it." He let go. His hands were trembling worse than hers. Through the side window, she saw a man in a flight jacket standing among the firefighters, hair grayer than she remembered, waiting at the bottom of the stairs like he had known this night was coming for 12 years. The door handle started to turn from the outside. The cockpit door swung open and cold night air rushed in, carrying the smell of jet fuel, wet concrete, and the sharp ozone of emergency lights. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. The only sounds were the FO's uneven breathing, the low hiss of the captain's oxygen, and the distant thump of fire truck pumps. Sarah's hands finally betrayed her, fine tremors running from her wrists up into her forearms until she had to press them flat against her thighs to make them stop. The FO looked at his own fingers still hovering over the yoke as if they belonged to someone else. Then the noise arrived all at once. Boots on metal stairs shouted medical commands, the high whine of a stretcher being unfolded. A paramedic leaned in first. "We've got him." They worked fast and gentle, sliding the captain out while the FO stayed frozen in the right seat. Sarah unclipped her harness and stood. Her legs felt like they belonged to a different body. She reached down, zipped the black backpack closed with deliberate care, and slung it over one shoulder the way she had every school morning for 12 years. The thermos inside clinked once against the empty space where the checklist card used to live. Denise appeared in the doorway, eyes red. Behind her, the businessman in the loud tie stood pale and silent. When Sarah stepped past him, he found his voice, rough and small. I was wrong. Back there, the things I said. You saved every one of us." He couldn't meet her eyes. "I'm sorry." She gave him the same quiet nod she used on kids who finally admitted they'd copied homework. No lecture, just acceptance. Outside, the runway was a circus of red and blue. Crash crews sprayed foam near the blown tire. Passengers were already filing down the rear stairs into waiting buses, some crying, some laughing the shaky laugh of people who had just remembered they were alive. A tall officer in a flight jacket waited at the bottom of the forward stairs, hair silver at the temples, the same steady eyes she had last seen on a Nevada ramp 12 years earlier. Her old wing commander. He didn't speak at first. He simply raised one hand in a slow, formal salute that held until she returned it, backpack still hanging from her shoulder like any other teacher heading home after a long day. "Viper," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "Took you long enough." Before she could answer, a second official voice cut across the tarmac, the base operations commander, speaking into a handheld radio that was also patched to the tower frequency so every headset on the field could hear. "All stations, this is MacCord Ops. Civilian Flight 447 is secure. Pilot incapacitation handled. Aircraft down safe with minor damage. Special acknowledgement to the assisting pilot, who identified herself as former callsign Viper. Outstanding airmanship. The Air Force sees you. Welcome back." The words rolled across the concrete and into the night. The FO, now standing on the stairs behind her, let out a sound that was half laugh and half sob. "They know," he whispered. "Everybody knows." Sarah felt the last of the adrenaline drain out of her. The backpack strap dug into her shoulder, the same ordinary black bag that had carried lesson plans and peppermints and, without her ever planning it, the last piece of who she used to be. She adjusted at once, the way she always did before walking into a classroom, and followed her old commander toward the waiting ambulance that would take the captain to the base hospital. 18 months later, the same black backpack sat on the floor beside Sarah's desk in an 8th grade history classroom that smelled of dry erase markers and cafeteria pizza. The walls still held student projects and a single new framed photograph. 2 F-22s flying escort on a civilian airliner at sunset, the military field lights glowing far below. She still taught the Cuban Missile Crisis and the cost of decisions made at altitude. She still unwrapped a peppermint when the afternoon dragged. The only real change was the quiet way students sometimes looked at her when the news mentioned an aircraft emergency, as if they were trying to match the woman with the cardigan to the stories their parents whispered. On a clear Saturday, her old wing commander visited again. He sat in one of the two small desks, knees almost to his chest, and waited until the last student left. Then he walked her out to the parking lot where the Cascades stood dark against the evening sky. The backpack hung from her shoulder, lighter now. Lesson plans, a decent thermos of tea, one peppermint for the drive. "You could come back," he said. "Full reinstatement? The squadron would take you tomorrow." Sarah looked at the empty classroom windows, then at the quiet sky above them. "I already came back," she answered. "Just not the way either of us expected. These kids need someone who knows the difference between a textbook and the real price the sky can ask." He studied her for a long moment, then smiled the way he used to after a clean debrief. "The sky doesn't forget a viper. Turns out the ground doesn't either." She drove home under a sky that held no contrails, only the soft promise that some names, once spoken at altitude, never really leave the air. In the rearview mirror, the school lights winked out one by one. What would you have done in her place? Kept the ordinary life, or answered when the sky called your old name? If this story moved you, hit subscribe. There's a new one waiting for you tomorrow. An empty classroom at dusk, a black backpack resting on a desk, and far above the building 2 thin white lines writing something only the sky can still read.